there, it's Bev, and today we're going to do an episode of Book Talk. I just wanted to talk about a hot topic right now, that is the idea of politics in writing. So I know a lot of people have their opinions about this. I have my very strong opinion on it. You know, whenever we're thinking about politics, we have to think about who they're affecting. And one of the things that affects everybody is, what's going on in the world around us. Now, whenever we kind of put ourselves in a bubble and don't pay attention to politics, that's a privilege. If you don't have to pay attention to politics, that's a privilege. And yes, I know some people are like, I'm not privileged, I'm poor, or I'm not privileged, I've never gotten anything for this or that. Being this thing has never done anything for me. But the fact is that privilege is one of those things you have, whether you use it or not. And that so many people have that privilege of not paying attention because nothing affects them. And there are a lot of people that it really does affect. And what we have to think about whenever we're through and talking about politics and writing is how politics affect writing, because our politics influence our writing. Okay, so if I'm writing something and I'm drawing it in from real world experiences, I may write something that reflects the real world just in a different way. A lot of this happens with fantasy. It comes in that fantasy worlds often have these different conflicting politics and different things between different worlds and different people. Science fiction is another example. It is kind of a way that allows us the freedom to use the politics that we have in a way that is separate from the real world. But even if you're reading fantasy or you're reading, science fiction, politics are still there. They just have a different name. There is a lot of examples in various popular books, and I think it's really important that we notice those things. Now, one of the things that comes up on Facebook and everywhere is somebody will say something along the lines of, I don't want politics in my feed. Fine. Everybody's got a choice. If you don't want politics in your feed, that's fine. You've got to curate your own feed. You can't demand that everybody on your feed not post about politics. And that's what I've been seeing. It's not necessarily people expressing their opinion that they don't want to see politics. Instead of snoozing or unfriending these people that are posting about politics, people like me, they're just complaining about it and wanting people to stop. Well, you don't have that control over other people. Complaining and, telling people that they should stop that's not the way to go. Snooze people. If you can't handle the politics, for various reasons, and there's lots of reasons. Privilege is one of them, but there are other reasons. Some people just can't handle that influx of negativity that we have going on right now. And that's really important to realize, that just because somebody says they don't want politics in their feed, we can't make the assumption that it's just because they're privileged. Maybe they are, but we don't know. It could be they're an LGBT person and they don't want to hear the negative stuff that's going around about other LGBT people. They could be of a different origin than white, and maybe they don't want to hear all of this stuff about ICE and all this stuff. Maybe it makes them feel bad and scares them. However, I'm going to encourage people who are in that camp that don't want politics because it's scary or, it makes you sad. We can't hide from it forever. Unfortunately, that's just one of those things that it's going to affect us, every one of us. And one of the things I try to bring about is when we're talking about writing and we're talking about politics, not only does it make its way into our writing, but it also affects how we can write. There are many people that write dark romance, erotic romance, gay romance, lesbian romance, non-binary characters, transgender characters, all these characters, right? Well, if there suddenly is a ban on anything LGBT related in writing, then we don't have any way to share our writing. We can't do that. If you are a writer of dark romance and they decide they're going to ban pornography and they're going to call anything that has sex scenes in it pornography, then writers of erotic romance, dark romance, anything that has those intimate scenes, they're going to be affected too. And one of the things that we have to realize is that that's politics. Censorship is politics. And if we let that happen, the world is going to be poorer for it. Because the fact is that just because you don't like sex scenes and you prefer clean romance doesn't mean others don't have the right to write it and read it. And, it's one of those things that whenever we really get deeper into this situation, there's a lot of layers. Mystic ideals, the Christian nationalist ideals, this idea of, nothing can be revealed, everything has to be closed door, and all of this, there's a lot of ideals that push this idea that nobody should be allowed to write these things. And, it comes up a lot in the dark romance circles. And I get it. Some of it's pretty nasty. Some of it is really awful. However, it's therapeutic, and for some people it's cathartic. So if it's a catharsis for the person reading it, it can be extremely helpful to their mental health. And it's just like, we have people that, believe that there should be no such thing as a grape scene in a book. Well, I know in person several people that prefer to read them and watch the person heal in a way that they never got to heal because they were SA'd. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, things like rape, assault, SA, all those things, those are all things that happen in real life. And, if you let things sway you that other people say, things aren't going to be written that you can share with the world that maybe could be extremely impactful and help other people. I write some darker scenes. However, my books always have a happily ever after or a happy for now. And I say that, the happy for now, because I write a lot of series. And in a series, you never know what's going to happen in the next book. So what we have to do is decide where we're going. A lot of my writing is about mental health and healing after trauma and the people that help somebody heal, but there's no magic healing. It's not like something happens and then 2 days later they're just fine. That's not the way it works. And, since I work in the mental health field, I know how this stuff happens. And I bring that into my writing. Yes, it's dark in places, but there's always a light at the end. And with so many of these darker writers, there's always something bright at the end. However, there is a genre that is true dark romance where there's no happy ending. And again, this could be a catharsis for someone to read it. And we have to realize that what somebody else gets out of a story, even if we don't understand it, it's still there. And maybe they just read it for enjoyment. Maybe they just like it. We don't know why somebody reads what they do, but there is so much going on in various corners of the writing world where authors are put down for what they write. And we can't do that. We can't let our own opinions extend to wanting to ban books. It's a slippery slope. You ban somebody that writes dark romance, the next thing you know, what you write is banned. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, I write this kind of romance, and I don't think dark romance should exist because my romance is good and happy and everything like that. What happens if you ban dark romance and the next thing they ban is regular romance? You don't know. It's a slippery slope to the state controlling what we are able to write, controlling what we're able to read, and throwing that freedom of speech thing out the window. We are free to write and read whatever we want, and that's pretty amazing because not everybody has that. And if things happen the wrong way, it could be taken from us. And we've got to fight to keep doing what we do, and that can mean dealing with politics. I'm queer, and a lot of things affect me in a strong way. I have to fight for my rights as a queer person. I can't just let them decide that everything related to queer is pornography, that we can't even exist because our very existence is pornographic. That any mention of somebody that's gay makes it pornographic. And that's what they're trying to do, the people in charge. And, that's not fair and that's not true. And then you get people that are like, well, gay people always talk about sex. And, all of the gay books are about sex. And my question is, what's it matter? That's not true, but also what's it matter? There's plenty of erotica out there with straight people. And I read some of it. I mean, I was 16 years old and ordering books from the Library of Erotic Literature. My mom didn't care. I wrote a check, sent it in, they sent me the books. There was no check for the age. So I was getting these books at a young age, and I was ordering different books through the Science Fiction Book Club. They had a few in there. And those things are things that kids seek out of curiosity, especially kids who, like me, were raised in a very conservative area with parents that never talked about sex, ever. And that curiosity was ingrained. So yeah, I went outside the norm and I found out about it for myself. Was it the best? No, because that's not real. That's like, erotica isn't the way real sex goes. And, that's one of those things about everybody's like, we must protect the children. No, the parents must protect the children. The parents must deal with these issues. It is not the responsibility of the community at large to eliminate everything that might hurt children in the sense of what they learn about and what they read. That's not the way it works. Parents need to curate their reading lists. Parents need to limit it if that's what they want to do. Now, I believe that parents should at least talk about sex. And if they bring home a book that's erotic, then rather than just taking it out of their hands, discuss it. Why this is not appropriate for them to read, what is a better idea for them to read. Discuss what sex is. And, the earlier you get into that with adolescents, the better, because the more they know, the better armed they are to deal with it whenever it comes up. It's one of those things that I've always championed is sex education, and writing doesn't need to be the very first introduction to sex kids have. It shouldn't be. Their parents need to be that. Okay, yes, we need to protect children to a degree. However, that doesn't mean we have to eliminate all adult spaces. If children aren't supposed to be there, then that's on the parents that they let their child be there. My parents never policed anything on the internet for me. I was on Adult Friend Finder as a 16-year-old because I made a 21-year-old profile. And that was the way I interacted and had these erotic role plays and stuff like that. And she never knew because she didn't curate my experience. She never talked about sex. So, that was a big deal at that time because what else could I have done? I reached out to find the information that I wanted to know as a teenager. So, this whole censorship idea of cutting out things to protect the children, parents need to take responsibility. If you don't want your child doing something, it's your responsibility to do it. This is just the way I feel. I have 2 children. I had those conversations. My eldest found his way onto Archive of Our Own, which has a lot of erotic stories on it in the collections. So we had the discussion. I told him I don't really feel comfortable with you entering the MA section, and I had to trust him not to. I made that choice. He said he wouldn't, and he didn't. As he got older, of course, I can't stop an adult. I mean, he's 20 now. So whatever he wants to read, look at, find on the internet, that's up to him. Not my place to stop him. My 16-year-old, I still have a place to deal with those things that he should and shouldn't do. So we have to realize that protection isn't something that eliminates all adult spaces. Adults need spaces to be adults. Adults need spaces that cater to their wants, their needs, their desires. And so we really need to understand that this is all politics. Whether or not you can go online and go to a website and read fan fiction that's erotic matters. You may never do it, but trying to take down the people that have this website that doesn't allow people underage on it to start with, it's not their responsibility to keep underage people off if they find a way around things. And trust me, as a 16-year-old who did that, they're going to. So this is where you have to have those discussions. That's where politics comes in. That's where we are missing the mark, because I can say all I want, I don't want politics in my feed. Politics is going to come for me. It's going to affect me. And, if it's not affecting you, that's a privilege that you don't have to worry about it. But if you want to be an ally to people it is affecting, if you want to help people, then you've got to know some of these things and know what's happening. Because otherwise you're going to be sitting there and it's going to come out of nowhere and you find out that everything you write is banned because you didn't pay attention to what was going on. And yes, I know conceivably one person can't make a big difference, but you know what? They can. Anyone can make a big difference. And that's one of those things that we have to understand. Every person makes a difference. And that's why we have to do what we do. That's why we have to write what we write. That's why we have to do these things that expand the minds of anybody that's reading our works. Well, that was pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. I will be back after I get more information on my cancer journey. The Teal journey will continue once I have an appointment and I see when they're going to play support. I will talk to you more about what that means. And then I will keep you guys updated both on Book Talk and with what's going on in the cancer treatment. And that's one of those things that I appreciate all the well wishes and everything, but I don't have to worry because I'm going to beat this thing. That's all there is to it. And your support matters. And, everybody that has sent me a message, that has responded to one of my posts, I really appreciate it. And if you would please spread that information because, like I said in the last Teal journey, ovarian cancer is often overlooked, and it is a very aggressive form of cancer if it is not caught within the first 2 stages. And it has a very high recurrence rate. Like I said, if you don't make your yearly doctor's appointments, if you don't get checked out, if you have these strangely random symptoms that seem like they're coming from nowhere, it's going to make a difference. We have to advocate for ourselves, and we have to try to make sure we stay healthy and catch these things early. And just because you're not older doesn't mean it can't happen. I'm 45. For a cancer diagnosis, that's pretty young. And there are kids that get cancer. So your age is not going to protect you, no matter what. So it's important to have your yearly gynecologist appointment, and it's very important to have your yearly mammogram, especially if you're over the age of 40. And it's no fun, but you also need to hit that colonoscopy at 45. All right, that's it for today. I enjoyed talking to y'all, and I hope to see you next time.